This is the day the Lord has made. Let us rejoice and be glad in it. It is great having everybody here this morning, and especially all of our visitors. I counted 12 at the last count, so it's great having all of you here. Hope that you'll come back and visit with us. At the end of last week's sermon, I was talking to a couple about my sermons and everything, and I told them that I like doing series because it helps me through my weeks, to know what I'm going to be talking about the next Sunday and get focused on that and do the reading and study and everything. And I'm sure everybody's internet is the same. If you buy something, you're going to see advertisements about other things associated with that. Like if you buy a pair of shoes, you're going to see shoes or pants or dresses, advertised. And I was on a social media, and there was some come up about Bible study materials, and so I bought it. And it's been a couple of months ago. Well, sure enough, I had something come up last week about a sermon series with Ecclesiastes. It was only for $8, and so I bought it. And it's only for 6 sermons, and when I looked at it, it was kind of like you take a stone and you skip it across the lake, and just where it hits. And this series was only picking up a verse here and a verse there, and and trying to make a sermon out of it. But it wasn't a sermon outline; it was just giving out some thoughts that you could do using these scriptures. And to me, it didn't really make sense to do a sermon. And I read a few of the chapters of Ecclesiastes again, just to refresh it in my mind. And there's just way too much material in Ecclesiastes that we can use in our life today. It's kind of like when we looked at Habakkuk. This is a book that most people didn't have studied before, but there was a lot of information in that applied to us today. And that's the reason we studied it. And it's the same thing with Ecclesiastes. I don't think you could really cover Ecclesiastes by just picking up 4 or 5 scriptures a week and studying it. So we're going to take the next few weeks. I don't know how long it's going to take. If we can combine some, it won't take the 12 weeks because there are 12 chapters, but it might take 12 weeks because, like I said, there's a lot of good information, and we'll talk about that later, but a lot of good information that we can apply to our lives today and make us, better Christians, if you will, and how to look at life. So it's book of Ecclesiastes, and it's chasing the wind. Good. Ecclesiastes, the quest for the chief good. In the book of Ecclesiastes can be broken down into these 4 points. The quest by personal experiment, chapters 1 and 2. The quest by general observations, chapters 3, 4, and 5. The quest by practical morality, chapters 6, 7, and 8. And then the quest reviewed and concluded in chapters 9 through 12. Now, I want you to suggest to you, if you can, go on YouTube and look up for the Bible Project and type in Ecclesiastes. I did that, and I found 2 really short, full explanations of Ecclesiastes. One of them I might show next week, and it's the one where they show, we've had them in our Sunday morning class, where it's kind of like a blank parchment, and then an invisible pen or marker is writing words and pictures and everything. And it's only like a 2 or 3 minute video, but he goes into great detail and explains the book of Ecclesiastes. And so we might see that next week. But go out there and watch these 2 videos, and it will give you an idea of what is going on in the book. Now, the name Ecclesiastes comes from the Latin form of the Greek word for preacher. Who is the author? We don't know for sure. The majority of the scholars, because of how the book is written, think that it is King Solomon. But it does not come out and state that, but it's between Proverbs and Songs of Solomon, so that's how it's been put in. So most people do think that it is Solomon, but it does not state. As you know, King Solomon was blessed by God to be the wisest man on earth. I say blessed, but as we'll read next week, Solomon did not think of it as a blessing, but more of a curse, if you will, and we'll get more into that later. there are two parts or people portrayed in the book of Ecclesiastes. The author of the book, who introduces the narrator in chapter 1, verse 1, as Koheleth, starting with either a K or a Q, depending on where you look it up. The word Koheleth is translated teacher or preacher. And again, the name of the book, Ecclesiastes. Now, the closing statements are also done by the author in chapter 12, verses 9 through 14. Now, the person talking throughout the book of Ecclesiastes is the teacher, and some of them call him a critic or a skeptic because of how it is worded. Now, what do you see in this drawing? Do you see a skull? Or do you see a woman sitting at a vanity mirror looking at herself in a mirror? This drawing is done by Charles Allen Gilbert. And I mentioned before that my parents were into antiques, and my dad had 3 of these drawings in his bedroom. And this one is titled Vanity. And it's kind of interesting that she's sitting at what we call a vanity. But she's looking at herself. You can see here the woman sitting here looking at herself in the mirror. The vanity's here, and then the mirror, and with the doily, whatever you call it, makes it look like a skull. Vanity. That's what that is, isn't it? We stand and we look at ourselves and we duty ourselves up and whatever. And it's called vanity. Well, that's how the writer starts off with Ecclesiastes. Verse 1, the words of the preacher, the son of David, king in Jerusalem. And so that is where the author is introducing who is going to be talking throughout the rest of Ecclesiastes. And like I said, the skeptic or the teacher starts off, vanity of vanities, says the preacher. Vanity of vanities, all is vanity. What profit has a man from all of his labor in which he toils under the sun? Now, the NASB, the New American Standard, instead of vanity, uses futility. The NIV uses meaningless. The Hebrew word, when you go back to the original writing, the Hebrew word here is hevel, Hevel. Hevel, which literally means a vapor or smoke. This word hevel is used 38 times in Ecclesiastes to describe life as temporary or fleeting. Kind of like looking at your reflection in a mirror. We are here today and gone tomorrow. I thought of it as a cloud. You know, it appears solid and it changes shape, but you can't grab onto it. You can't hold on to a cloud, just like you can't fog or smoke. It has no substance. There's nothing to grab or hold on to. Now, vanity itself means excessive pride in or admiration of one's own appearance or achievements. That's what vanity is. We will see here that Solomon talks about his achievements in the next chapter. Now, I'm going to put Solomon as the writer of this book, and I think you will get the same impression as we read through the text. Vanity of vanities, says the preacher, vanity of vanities, all is smoke or vapor. What profit has a man from his own labor in which he toils under the sun? Solomon is going to lead us on a quest of the natural man looking for the chief good. It might be hard to understand at times, but Solomon breaks it down at the very end as the true meaning of life. Now, I'm going to share that final thought part, that final point at the end of this lesson. And I debated on doing that, but because the chapters can be kind of dark, and I don't mean like dark magic and all, but I mean dark as in how you perceive it and how he talks about life and everything. And so I didn't want to end with that kind of a dark notion, but bring to light what this is all about. So at the end of each chapter, we will bring up what the point is of his lessons. Now, Charles Allen Gilbert had at least 2 other prints. Like I said, my dad had 3, but I could not find the third one. The one on the right is titled Gossip. And you can see the several women there talking and gossiping. And it's funny because in my dad's painting or picture, where this woman's hand is holding an umbrella, in my dad's painting, it was a dagger. Like she's going to be, they're sitting there talking, but she's going to stab her friend in the back, which is a good example of gossip. Verses 4 and 5. One generation passes away, and another generation comes, but the earth abides forever. The sun also rises, and the sun goes down, and hastens to the place where it rose. The big blue ball keeps turning around and around. So we could keep doing today what we did yesterday, and the day before that, and the day before that. You might yell out, well, I had the weekend. I did something different than Monday through Friday. And that's true. But is it different than what you did last weekend or the weekend before that? Instead of saying day by day, let's go week by week. We're doing the same thing over and over and over again. We go to work, we come home, we eat dinner, we watch TV, we go to bed, for 5 days. And we might do something different, but when you look at your whole life, how much have you done that is totally different than what you did yesterday? And again, he gets kind of dark with this, but you've got to stay abreast of what he is trying to get across to us. We talk more about this later in the chapter, but people come and people go year after year, generation after generation, and the sun keeps rising in the east and setting in the west. Unless you live up in the northern hemisphere, like we did up in Iceland, and it doesn't do that. So, but anyway, for most people, the sun rises in the east and sets in the west. Again, this isn't me bringing this doom and gloom, but the teacher. Don't let this teacher get you down. I need you to stay positive and stick with me because there is a silver lining. Verses 6 and 7. The wind goes towards the south and turns around to the north. The wind whirls about continually and comes again on its circuit. Have you ever wondered why the weatherman refers to the weather as a weathered pattern? Because the weather has a specific pattern that it follows. Now, there are some differences and some changes, but for the most part, it's the same. Lows circulate clockwise. Highs circle counterclockwise. We have snow in the winter, not during the summer. We have 100 degrees like we've just had here recently, but not in December or January or February, because there is a pattern to how the weather goes. And that's what the writer here is telling us. Verse 7, all the rivers run into the sea, yet the sea is not full. To the place from which the rivers come, there they return again. When you go up hiking in the mountains and you find a little small stream that's coming up out of the rocks, that's going to go down the mountain and form up and go down. Other creeks are going to join it, and then it's going to go down and form a river. And then that river is going to go to the ocean. But the ocean has tides, but it doesn't fill up like a tub. Okay? No, it evaporates, goes up into the clouds, where it turns in, floats back over the mountains, gets heavy and rains, and it starts all over again. And that's been going on day, by year, by generations. It's just a continual cycle over and over and over again. Verse 8, all things are full of labor. Man cannot express it. The eye is not satisfied with seeing, nor the ear filled with hearing. Mankind is not the only thing on this planet that labors. The earth is laboring all the time. The magma, the heated magma is always expanding. When we were in Iceland, the mantles are separating. Here on the West Coast, one is going underneath the other. There's constant volcanic eruptions and islands being formed in the Pacific. There's always something going on. There's always turmoil in the earth. from the magma all the way up to the thinnest atmosphere in space. And it's the same way with us. We are always doing something. All things change and never rest. Man, after all his labor, is no nearer to finding rest than the sun, the wind, or the current, or the river. His soul will find no rest if he doesn't have God in his life. The senses are soon tired, yet still craving what is untried. I want you to remember this statement. Our soul will not find rest if we don't have peace from God. Think about that. Our soul will not find rest if we don't have the peace that comes from knowing God. Verses 9, 10, and 11. That which has been is what will be. That which is done is what will be done. And there is nothing new under the sun. Is there anything of which it may be said, see, this is new? It has already been in ancient times before us. There is no remembrance of former things, nor will there be any remembrance of things that are to come by those who will come after. Now, wait a minute, Reed. Computers are new. They didn't have those back in 1970s, 60s, whatever. No, but we did have libraries that we could go and look up things and do our own research. Computers have done nothing but made us lazy. We say, well, airplanes, that's something new. They didn't have those back whenever. No, but back then, 2,000 years ago, they had donkeys and they had horses to get them around. An airplane is nothing more but to get us from point A to point B in the fastest time. To get us places we've never been before. But when you were living in this little village and you went 50 miles, that might have been the farthest you've ever been before. And before the donkeys and horses, people walked on their 2 feet. So traveling, getting transportation is not new. The way we do it maybe is new, but what we're doing is not new. There's nothing new under the sun. All that our new creations or inventions do is what verse 11 states. We forget about the past. We forget about the former things. The same is true with what we call new today. People in 2,000 years from now, if the earth is still turning, will forget about us. And they will forget about the items that we are inventing today. The first automatically sliced commercial bread loaves were produced on July 6, 1928 in Chillicothe, Missouri, using the machine invented by Odo Roswetter, an Iowa-based Missouri jeweler. Funny how Solomon, in all of his wisdom, hit the nail on the head back however many thousands of years ago when he wrote these words. There will be no remembrance of former things. We take sliced bread today for granted. How many of us knew when it was invented? The bread slicer. So what Solomon is saying here, that we're going to forget about things from the past, is true. We forget about those things because it doesn't matter to us. The grief of wisdom. For those of you who think that being smart or having a vast amount of knowledge or foresight would be fantastic, it isn't. Some say that Albert Einstein was right on the verge of being crazy because of how smart he was. And Solomon, this is what he has to say about wisdom. Verse 12, I, the preacher, was king over Israel in Jerusalem, and I set my heart to seek and search out by wisdom concerning all that is done under heaven. This burdensome task. So we can see here that Solomon is the wisest man, but he sees it as a burden. Task that God has given to the sons of man, by which they may be exercised. I have seen all the works that are done under the sun, and indeed all is a vapor. All is smoke. All is vanity. And it's like grasping for the wind. What is crooked cannot be made straight, and what is lacking cannot be numbered. Solomon sees his blessing of being the wisest man to live as a burden. He could see everything, but he can't change anything. The world keeps going around and around, and the same sins are being committed. Nothing new. God destroyed the world because of how sinful man was with the flood. But then, a few generations later, God is destroying Sodom and Gomorrah because they were so sinful. So we see that man continually did what he wanted to do, following his own earthly lust. Again, it's not changing. We see the same thing happening today. Look, the sun is rising in the east as it always does, and nothing is different. Kind of like a never-ending Groundhog Day. The alarm goes off again at 6 a.m. and you roll yourself out of bed, and you might do something different all day long, but you go to bed and the alarm goes off again at 6 a.m. the next day, and you go through the same, doing whatever, just to go back to sleep and wake up again at 6 a.m. doing the same, reliving my birthday, February 3rd, over and over and over again, or February 2nd, I guess. But, that's how it is. That's what's happening. Solomon has seen everything under the sun, and indeed, it is all vanity, futility, cloudy, smoky, a vapor, and meaningless. It is like trying to grasp the wind as it blows by you. Have you ever rolled down your window and you're going down the highway and reach your hand out? Most people do the airplane or whatever, but have you ever tried to grasp the wind? You can't do it. Now, if you do, you cup your hands and you open it and you've grabbed air, but you haven't grabbed the wind. Wind is moving. It's a force. And that's what Solomon is saying that life is. It's like smoke. It's like a vapor. It's vanity. You can't change it. You can't catch it. Now, I don't want to leave you with all this doom and gloom. For those of you who have watched the Grand Ole Opry, there was a segment to where these old hillbillies got out there and they sang, a song, gloom and doom and excessive misery, deep, dark depression, and that's how we could look at the Ecclesiastes and how it is going. Solomon has not given us any upbeat yet. It's all doom and gloom. And I don't want you to end today with that. So here's a spoiler alert. We're going to go to Ecclesiastes 12, verses 13 and 14. And it just amazes me how often when I have a sermon set up that Alex or Glenn or whatever will bring up scriptures that I'm going to be using in my sermon. It's just wonderful the way the Lord works. But this is the ending of Ecclesiastes. And he gives us an upbeat ending, okay, like most stories do. And again, I didn't want to end you with the doom and gloom. I wanted to end you on a high note. So we're going to go to the ending and see what the writer has to say. Verse 13 of chapter 12. Let us hear the conclusion of the whole matter. We take everything and we boil it down. Okay? This is the conclusion. Fear God and keep his commandments. For this is man's all. What you did this past week, what you're going to do tomorrow and the next week, does not matter. What does matter, what gives our life meaning, is that we fear God and we keep his commandments. Remember that. Think about that. That is what matters. Verse 14, for God will bring every good work into judgment, including every secret thing, whether good or evil. And this is the verse that we looked at this morning in class, talking about the judgment. Okay? Everybody will face the judgment. Every secret thing, whether it's good or evil, we will have to answer for. But keep in mind every single day to fear God and to keep His commandments. That is what we need to do as Christians every single day. We don't fear God as in trembling and scared of God. No, we fear God with respect. We fear God by living our lives in the Christian life like we're supposed to. We remember God and we live a godly life every day, day in and day out. That, brothers and sisters, gives our life meaning. That gives us something to look forward to live for. But we also need to share that good news with others. We need to teach others about God and give them the hope that we have. The hope of eternal life with God, our Savior, in heaven forever. If there's anything that we can do for you this morning, let us know. Let us help you. If you need prayers to live a better Christian life, we can help you. We can pray for you. We can gather around you and support you. Or maybe you haven't put Christ on in baptism. Our baptistry is ready. And we can take care of that sin problem this morning so that you too can have something to live for